The galaxy's last hope. The galaxy was on the brink of collapse. For years, the alien forces known as the Zorith had slowly and methodically wiped out entire star systems. No one had been able to stop them. The once proud fleets of different planets and species were now scattered and broken. The Zorith were ruthless, their technology far beyond anything the galaxy had ever seen. They had already crushed the heart of the resistance, and now Earth was the last hope. In the final stronghold, deep within Earth's capital city, military leaders and scientists were preparing for a fight they didn't believe they could win. The Earth's forces had never been a match for the powerful alien fleet, and most believed it was only a matter of time before the Zorith would destroy Earth, just like they had with countless other civilizations. But in the midst of all this despair, something unusual happened. A signal, faint but unmistakable, appeared on Earth's communication systems. It wasn't a typical distress call or an SOS from another planet. It was something much stranger, something deliberate. The signal was encrypted, and no one knew where it came from. It had no origin, no identifiable source. It was as if it had appeared out of nowhere, cutting through the endless void of space like a message from the past. The world's leaders gathered in a secret underground command center to discuss the mysterious signal. Commander Riva Mendez, one of Earth's top strategists, stood at the center of the room, her brow furrowed as she analyzed the data. The room was silent except for the soft hum of computers and the tapping of keyboards as analysts tried to make sense of the strange message. "What are we looking at?" General Harris asked, his voice rough and filled with anxiety. It's not from any known species. It doesn't even match the Zorith's transmission patterns." Riva leaned closer to the screen. The message was short, almost cryptic, and yet it carried an overwhelming sense of urgency. "Humanity is not alone. The galaxy's fate is in your hands. Wake the old power." The message was signed only with an ancient symbol, one Riva recognized from old Earth legends. It was the symbol of a long-lost civilization, one that had vanished thousands of years ago. There was no mistake. The message was real, and it carried a weight that none of them fully understood. "Wake the old power," Riva repeated under her breath. The room was tense, the silence stretching as everyone processed the words. "If this message is real," she said, turning to the assembled commanders, "then it's our only shot. We don't have time to waste." The thought was crazy. How could humanity's only chance lie in something ancient, something lost in time? Yet they had no other choice. The Zorith were coming for them. The countdown had already started, and Earth's defenses were too weak to stop them. Riva ordered her team to scour Earth's archives, looking for anything related to the old power. Hours passed, and it felt like the weight of the universe rested on their shoulders. Just when hope seemed lost, a breakthrough occurred. Deep in the bowels of Earth's oldest military facility, hidden beneath layers of secrecy, the team uncovered a forgotten project, a weapon that predated the current technological age by millennia. It was a relic from a time long forgotten, a weapon designed by an ancient human civilization, far more advanced than anything Earth had today. It was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen, an energy source so powerful that it could potentially change the course of the war. But there was one major problem. No one knew how to activate it. "This is it," General Harris said, his voice filled with awe as he looked over the holographic blueprints. "This is our last chance, but we don't have the luxury of time. The Zorith fleet is already moving towards Earth. If we don't activate this thing in the next few days, we won't have a planet to protect." Riva nodded grimly. "We'll have to figure it out. We don't have any other choice." Meanwhile, across the galaxy, the Zorith warships glided through space, their massive fleets advancing with terrifying precision. The Zorith were relentless, their invasion of Earth all but certain. They had underestimated humanity once, and it had cost them. But now, they knew better. Earth was not as weak as it had appeared. In the heart of the enemy fleet, Commander Xthan stood before a massive holographic display, watching as his ships drew closer to Earth. He had heard the rumors about humanity's potential, the whispers of an ancient power. But to him, it was just that, rumors. He had no intention of letting some ancient weapon or forgotten technology stop his victory. He would crush Earth, just as he had crushed so many others. They still resist, X then muttered, narrowing his eyes as he watched the human fleet scramble to prepare for the inevitable. Let them play their games. It will make their defeat all the sweeter. Back on Earth, Riva and her team worked tirelessly to decode the ancient technology, the weight of the galaxy's fate pressing down on them. Each breakthrough brought them closer to understanding how to use the weapon. But with every passing minute, the Zorith fleet drew nearer. As Earth's last line of defense, Riva couldn't afford to fail. The galaxy's hope rested on her shoulders, and humanity's survival depended on their ability to unlock the ancient power in time. It was their only hope, and the pressure was mounting. The signal was clear. The clock was ticking. Would humanity be able to awaken the ancient power before it was too late? The answer lay in the hidden corners of their forgotten past, an answer they were racing against time to uncover. The forgotten power. The hours stretched into days, and with every tick of the clock, the pressure on Earth's leaders and military grew heavier. Commander Riva Mendez had never faced a challenge as monumental as this. The galaxy's fate rested on the ability of a small team of scientists, engineers, and military strategists to decipher the ancient weapon hidden deep within Earth's history. Yet, despite their best efforts, the weapon's activation remained a mystery. In the dimly lit command center, Riva stood at the head of the table, her eyes fixed on the large digital map that showed the movement of the Zorith fleet. The enemy's ships were advancing steadily, and Earth had only a matter of days before they reached the planet's orbit. If the weapon was not ready by then, the Earth would fall, along with all of humanity's hope for survival. Time is running out, Riva muttered, more to herself than anyone else in the room. If we don't unlock the weapon soon, we're finished. General Harris, who had been pacing nervously at the back of the room, stopped and turned toward her. Commander, the Zorith are closing in on Earth. There's no way we can fend them off with the resources we have. If that weapon is the key, then we need to figure it out now. Riva nodded, frustration building in her chest. They had uncovered enough of the weapon's blueprints to see its potential. The weapon was powered by an unknown energy source, capable of producing an overwhelming burst of energy, enough to obliterate entire fleets. However, its activation was another matter entirely. There were no clear instructions. No one knew how to charge it, let alone wield it. The team of scientists, engineers, and experts had been poring over ancient texts, deciphering every clue, and testing every theory they could come up with. Yet each attempt to activate the weapon had failed. The energy source was unlike anything they had seen before, and the machine itself was a work of advanced technology far beyond the current level of human understanding. But then, one of the scientists, Dr. Emilia Zhang, made a discovery that changed everything. While reviewing ancient data from a long-lost human colony, she found a reference to something called the core of Gaia, an energy center said to be the heart of an ancient human civilization. It was rumored to be capable of harnessing limitless power. Dr. Zhang rushed into the command center, excitement in her voice. Commander, I think we found the missing link. The core of Gaia. It's the key to activating the weapon. Riva's eyes widened in surprise. The core of Gaia. What exactly is it? Dr. Zhang quickly explained. The core of Gaia was an advanced energy source developed by an ancient human civilization long before our time. It was said to be capable of harnessing the very forces of the planet itself. Gravity, magnetism, energy fields, and amplifying them in a way that no one thought possible. If we can access this core and channel its energy, we may be able to activate the weapon. Riva felt a spark of hope ignite within her. Where is this core? How do we access it? Dr. Zhang hesitated. The core is buried deep beneath the Earth's surface. It's hidden in a long-forgotten underground facility, located somewhere beneath the ancient ruins of the first human city. but we've never been able to pinpoint its exact location. The map we have is incomplete. Then we'll find it, Riva declared. We don't have time to waste. I'll send a team to search for the facility. Get us a location, Dr. Zhang. While Dr. Zhang and her team worked to pinpoint the exact location of the core, Riva gathered her best soldiers and strategists. A team would be sent to the surface to dig and find the facility, no matter what it took. The Zoreth were getting closer, and if they didn't act quickly, the last hope for humanity would be lost. Days passed in a flurry of activity. Dr. Zhang's team worked tirelessly, following every lead they could find. The team of soldiers prepared for what would undoubtedly be a dangerous mission, and Riva stayed at the command center, watching as the enemy fleet drew closer with each passing hour. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, Dr. Zhang's team located the entrance to the ancient facility. It was buried deep beneath the ruins of an old city that had been lost to time, a place forgotten by history. The soldiers gathered their gear, preparing for the long journey underground. As they descended into the darkness, the atmosphere was tense. The underground tunnels were eerily silent, and the only sound was the crunching of their boots on the dusty floor. The walls were lined with strange markings, signs of a civilization long gone. The deeper they went, the more they realized just how ancient this place truly was. It had been hidden from the world for centuries, waiting for the right moment to be discovered. After hours of digging, they finally reached the central chamber. And there, in the heart of the facility, was the core of Gaia, an enormous, glowing orb of energy suspended in midair, pulsing with a power that felt almost alive. One of the soldiers, Lieutenant Carter, stepped forward, eyes wide with awe. This is it. The core. Riva's voice crackled through their communications, steady but urgent. Activate it, Lieutenant. We need that power now. But as Carter approached the core, the ground beneath them began to tremble. The Zoreth fleet had arrived in Earth's orbit. They were about to strike, and the planet was on the brink of destruction. Would the core's power be enough to save humanity, or was this all for nothing? Time was running out, and Earth's fate rested in the hands of those who dared to awaken the forgotten power hidden beneath their feet. Rising from the ashes, the rumble of distant explosions echoed through the underground chamber as the Zoreth fleet began its attack. Earth's final defenses had already been broken, and now the enemy was at the gates. But deep beneath the surface, in an ancient, long-forgotten facility, humanity's last hope pulsed with energy. Lieutenant Carter stood frozen in awe, staring at the glowing core of Gaia, its immense power seemingly alive, waiting to be awakened. His hand hovered over the control panel, the final piece needed to activate the weapon. The weight of the moment pressed heavily on him. The fate of humanity rested in his hands. Lieutenant, do it now. Riva's voice crackled through the communication system. It was steady, commanding, but laced with urgency. Carter swallowed hard and slammed his palm onto the control panel. A burst of blinding light erupted from the core, filling the entire chamber. The ground beneath them trembled as if the Earth itself had awakened. The energy from the core surged through the facility's ancient power conduits, lighting up the walls with an eerie blue glow. Outside, the Zoreth ships loomed in Earth's atmosphere, their monstrous forms casting dark shadows over the planet. The battle had begun, and Earth's remaining forces had already been pushed to their limits. The enemy's fleet was massive, a terrifying display of power that Earth could not hope to match with conventional weapons. But this ancient power, this core, was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. It was their last, desperate chance. Back at the command center, Riva watched the monitors intently. Her team was ready. The core's activation had triggered a massive surge of energy that reached across the planet, and the Earth's remaining defense systems powered up, coming to life after years of dormancy. Riva turned to General Harris, her eyes narrowing. We have one shot at this. The weapon needs to be deployed now. If we wait too long, it'll be too late. Harris nodded, and gave the order to launch the final strike. The surface of Earth trembled as the enormous cannons, powered by the core's energy, activated. The ground shook with the force of the weapon's power. The ancient weapon had finally been unlocked, but its use was still a mystery. No one knew exactly what it would do or how it would affect the enemy. They could only hope that the ancient technology, so long dormant, would be enough. Above, the Zorith fleet had already begun their assault. Waves of enemy warships swarmed toward Earth, unleashing barrages of energy blasts that tore into the planet's defenses. Earth's forces retaliated, but it was clear that their strength was no match for the overwhelming might of the Zorith. As the enemy closed in on Earth's surface, Riva clenched her fists, hoping that the core's power would be enough. She knew that without it, humanity's resistance would crumble. This ancient weapon was their final chance to fight back. Back in the underground facility, Carter and his team watched in awe as the energy from the core began to surge through the system. The power had activated the facility's central weapon, a massive beam cannon that was designed to channel the core's energy into a single devastating strike. "We're ready," Carter said, his voice tight with tension. "This is it." With a final deep breath, he activated the weapon. A massive beam of pure energy shot out from the facility's central core, cutting through the underground tunnels and out into the open sky. The beam blazed across the sky like a second sun, illuminating the night and reaching for the stars. In space, the Zorith ships were caught off guard by the sudden, unexpected attack. The beam struck the first enemy vessel with blinding force, tearing through its hull and causing an explosion so powerful that it sent shockwaves through the enemy fleet. The Zorith ships scattered, their coordinated assault thrown into disarray. Riva watched from the command center, her breath caught in her throat as the beam reached its full power. "It's working," she whispered, her voice full of disbelief. "We've done it." But the victory was short-lived. The Zorith fleet quickly regrouped, adapting to the new threat with frightening speed. The damage caused by the beam was significant, but the enemy wasn't done yet. They would come back stronger, angrier, and more determined to wipe out Earth once and for all. "The Zorith are regrouping," General Harris said, his voice grave. "They won't stop until they've destroyed us all. That weapon isn't enough to win this war." Riva's mind raced. The first strike had been successful, but it had only delayed the inevitable. The Zorith were too powerful, too relentless. The weapon had bought them some time, but time was something they no longer had. "We need to act fast," Riva said, turning to her team. "Deploy the second phase. Prepare the secondary weapons." There was no more room for hesitation. They had activated the core and unleashed its energy, but now they would need to push beyond that. Humanity's strength didn't come from its technology alone. It came from its resolve, its unyielding will to survive. The battle was far from over. On the surface, the Earth's forces scrambled to defend their planet from the oncoming enemy fleet. Ships raced across the sky, dodging enemy fire and returning shots with whatever they had left. The air was thick with tension, and the fate of the world seemed to hang in the balance. But amidst the chaos, there was something else, something the Zorith hadn't anticipated. Humanity's greatest weapon wasn't just its technology. It was the spirit of its people, who had always fought for survival against impossible odds. The core had given them the power they needed, but it was their courage and determination that would truly make the difference. Riva stood firm in the command center, her eyes locked on the screens. There was no turning back now. They had awoken the ancient power, and they would use it to its fullest. It was humanity's last stand, and they would fight with everything they had. And so, the battle continued, the fate of the galaxy hanging in the balance. The Zorith fleet had underestimated Earth, and now they would discover the true strength of humanity, fierce, unrelenting, and ready to rise from the ashes of defeat. The turning tide. The battle raged on above Earth's surface, and the fate of the planet hung by the thinnest of threads. The Zorith fleet had been thrown into chaos by the unexpected surge of energy from the core, but their retaliation was swift and merciless. Despite the first successful strike, the enemy's numbers and firepower were overwhelming. Riva Mendes stood at the helm of the command center, her hands clenched into fists, staring at the holoscreen as the battle played out before her. The Earth's military was doing its best to hold the line, but their strength was waning. The Zorath were relentless, and Earth's resources were nearly exhausted. "General Harris, report," Riva called out, her voice sharp as she scanned the chaos on the display. Harris, his face grim, nodded toward the monitor. "Commander, our defenses are being torn apart. The Zorath have adapted to the core's energy beam. They've adapted their shields, and it's taking more energy than we have left to keep the beam powered." "Damn," Riva muttered under her breath, frustration building. "We've given them a taste of what we're capable of, but now they know we can hurt them. They're not going to make it easy." General Harris gave a terse nod. "We need to do something more. We can't keep this up much longer. If we don't have a new plan, Earth's defenses will fall before the end of the day." Riva's mind raced, looking for a glimmer of hope. She couldn't afford to lose. Not now. She had already seen the devastation the Zorath could bring. They weren't just invaders. They were hunters, stalking their prey with relentless precision. But humanity had something they didn't: determination, the spirit to fight against the odds. Her eyes fell on the map of the battlefield, watching as the Zorath ships moved into position for another full assault. But then, something caught her attention. A small cluster of Zorath vessels had strayed away from the main fleet. They were smaller, quicker ships, perhaps scouting for weak points in Earth's defenses. If they could take down these smaller ships, it might be enough to create an opening in the Zorath's formidable attack. "General, I need a strike force to take out those smaller ships," Riva ordered, her tone hardening. "Those ships could be the key to breaking their formation. If we can take them out, it will create confusion. They won't know what hit them." The general's eyes narrowed, sensing the weight of Riva's plan. "It's risky, Commander. Those ships are fast, and they'll be hard to hit with our current resources." "I don't care," Riva replied with conviction. "We take the risk, or we lose everything. I'm not going to sit here and watch humanity be wiped out because we were too afraid to act." Harris hesitated for a moment, then nodded. "Understood. I'll send in a squadron of our best pilots. They'll follow your orders to the letter." Within minutes, a group of elite fighter pilots was dispatched from the surface. These were Earth's finest, seasoned veterans who had fought in countless skirmishes. Their ships were armed with the most advanced weaponry Earth could muster, and they knew this mission was a long shot, but they were determined to succeed. In the depths of space, the small strike force of Zorath ships continued their reconnaissance, unaware of the incoming human assault. They were too focused on their task to realize they were being stalked. The first few fighter jets were almost invisible against the vastness of space, using stealth technology to hide their movements. The human pilots had trained for moments like this, where every shot counted, and the odds were stacked against them. The strike began with surgical precision. Earth's fighters darted into view, blasting apart the outer shields of the Zorath ships with a series of well-placed shots. The Zorath fighters attempted to retaliate, but the humans had anticipated every move. A well-timed series of maneuvers and laser blasts knocked one Zorath vessel off course, sending it spiraling into space, disabled and helpless. "Nice shot, Lieutenant," came the voice of Commander Rachel Diaz through the communication system. She was the lead pilot, and she was determined to make her shots count. The mission wasn't just about taking out the enemy, it was about sending a message. Humanity wasn't going down without a fight. One by one, Earth's fighters picked off the smaller Zorath vessels, their agile maneuvers making it almost impossible for the Zorath to respond. The remaining ships attempted to flee, but Earth's pilots were relentless, taking down every last one with precision and deadly force. But the battle wasn't over yet. As the last of the small Zorath vessels exploded in a burst of fire, the Zorath fleet began to regroup. their larger, more powerful ships still a looming threat to Earth's survival. The impact of the strike had thrown them off balance, but the full force of their might was still ahead. Riva clenched her fists in satisfaction. The strike had been a success. The Zoreth fleet had been momentarily disoriented, but they would soon regroup. It was time to press the advantage. Humanity had taken a bold step in the right direction, but there was still much to be done. "Now, General," Riva said, her voice filled with determination, "we make our move. Deploy the final weapon. Let's show the Zoreth what humanity is capable of." The battle was reaching its peak, and Riva knew that their window of opportunity was closing fast. The Zoreth had underestimated them, and now they were about to learn that the Earth wasn't ready to fall. Not yet. The final weapon, powered by the core's energy, was their last resort. If it worked, it would obliterate the Zoreth fleet in one devastating strike. But if it failed, Earth would be lost. There was no going back. Riva held her breath as the countdown began. She knew this was their final chance. All of humanity's survival depended on the success of this final move. There was no turning back now. The final strike. The countdown echoed through the command center, each second feeling like a lifetime. Riva stood at the heart of the operations room, her eyes locked onto the holographic display. The Zoreth fleet loomed large above Earth, their massive ships darkening the sky as they advanced. The small victory of their previous strike had done little to slow them down. Humanity was fighting against a force far beyond their own, and time was running out. 5, 4, 3. The voice of the system administrator rang out through the room, sharp and focused. The tension in the air was almost suffocating. Everyone present knew that this was the moment that would decide the fate of Earth. Riva's mind raced as the numbers ticked down. She could feel the weight of responsibility settling on her shoulders. If the weapon didn't work, if humanity's last-ditch effort failed, Earth would fall, and the entire galaxy would know that the Deathworlders had been beaten. She refused to let that happen. Humanity would survive, no matter what. The room held its breath. 2, 1, fire. A sharp, resounding command came from Riva as she slammed her fist onto the command button. The immense weapon, powered by the core of Gaia, hummed to life, its vast energy beginning to pulse with raw power. In an instant, the entire facility trembled as the core's energy fed into the massive cannon designed to unleash the final blow. Above Earth, the Zoreth fleet continued its descent, unaware of what was about to unfold. Their ships were closing in on their targets, their weapons primed for one last, devastating strike. They were confident, too confident. Humanity had made its stand, but the Zoreth believed they had already won. They were wrong. The core's energy shot out in a beam of unimaginable power, brighter than the sun, as it cut through space with brutal force. The beam was unstoppable, cutting through the darkness of space with a speed that left the Zoreth fleet no time to react. The first Zoreth flagship, the enormous battleship at the heart of the enemy formation, was the first to feel the full brunt of humanity's wrath. The energy beam slammed into the flagship with a force that shook the very fabric of space itself. A massive explosion erupted from the heart of the Zoreth ship, its shields cracking under the intensity of the blast. The ship's hull buckled and then shattered, sending debris flying in all directions. The Zoreth flagship was obliterated in a single cataclysmic burst. "We hit them. We actually hit them," shouted one of the operators, her voice full of disbelief. The room erupted into cheers, but Riva knew they weren't out of danger yet. The Zoreth fleet was still very much intact, and they would retaliate with everything they had. Another strike followed quickly, tearing into the heart of another Zoreth battleship. The beam had pierced the ship's shields with frightening ease, and the resulting explosion sent shockwaves through the enemy fleet. The Zoreth were scrambling now, their coordination faltering as their most powerful vessels were torn apart. "They're losing control," General Harris observed, his voice filled with cautious optimism. "The Zoreth are starting to break." But Riva knew it wasn't over. She could see the remaining Zoreth ships regrouping, adjusting their tactics. They were fierce warriors, fearless in the face of their enemies. They wouldn't just surrender. They would fight to the last ship, to the last soldier. "They won't give up," Riva muttered, her eyes narrowing. "Prepare for their retaliation. They're not going to sit back and let us finish them off." Indeed, as Riva predicted, the Zorith fleet quickly recovered. Their remaining ships positioned themselves in a defensive formation, with their most advanced fighters darting in and out of formation to strike at the human defenses. The Zorith had learned from their initial mistakes, and they were making their final push to end the battle. "We've got incoming," one of the technicians shouted as a barrage of energy blasts began to rain down from the remaining Zorith ships. The defense systems of Earth's remaining fleet struggled to hold up under the assault. Riva's heart pounded as the explosions rocked the command center. "Activate all remaining shields. Now," she barked, her voice steady despite the chaos unfolding around her. "Get the fighters out there. Protect the core at all costs." The sky above Earth became a violent battleground as humanity's last remaining forces raced into position to protect the weapon. The fighters launched from Earth's surface, racing to intercept the Zorith's deadly attack. Laser blasts filled the sky as both sides engaged in the most desperate, furious battle humanity had ever known. The final weapon had bought them precious time, but now Earth had to defend its last hope. The core of Gaia was the key to humanity's survival. If the Zorith took it down, the entire fleet would collapse, and Earth would fall. Lieutenant Carter, the same officer who had activated the core's energy, was leading the defense team. His ship darted through the chaotic battlefield, evading the Zorith's deadly fire. He was focused, determined, and willing to give everything to keep Earth's final weapon intact. As his ship weaved between explosions, he saw the Zorith fleet attempting to converge on the facility. He knew what he had to do. "Get to the core," Carter shouted through the comms to his team. "We hold them off here, or humanity's done." With those words, Carter and his squadron made a bold, desperate maneuver. They dove straight toward the Zorith ships, their lasers firing with deadly precision. It was a suicidal move, but it was all they had left. The Zorith couldn't have the core. They just couldn't. Riva's eyes were fixed on the screens, watching the battle unfold. Humanity was fighting for its survival. Every fighter, every ship, every last breath was being used to protect their world. The Zorith were beginning to fall back. But it wasn't enough yet. Earth's fighters continued to clash with the enemy, pushing back against overwhelming odds. Humanity had fought to the brink of extinction, but now they were turning the tide. As the battle entered its final stages, Riva knew one thing for sure. The Zorith had underestimated humanity's will to survive. The galaxy had witnessed the courage, the power, and the unyielding resolve of the Dithworlders, and they would never forget it. It wasn't just a fight for Earth, it was a fight for the galaxy itself. The last stand. The once terrifying Zorith fleet was now reeling from the devastating strikes. Their massive ships, which had once seemed invincible, were now falling apart one by one. But Riva knew better than to think it was over. The Zorith were fierce, their tactics brutal, and they weren't done yet. The battle was reaching its final, decisive moments, and every move counted. As the last of the fighter jets circled above Earth's surface, Riva's eyes remained locked on the holographic map. The Zorith's remaining ships were starting to retreat, at least the majority of them. But she could still feel the tension building in her chest. There was one last group of Zorith vessels in the distance, fast and deadly. These ships were built for speed, designed to slip past Earth's defenses and strike with precision. "They're not gone yet," Riva murmured, watching as the group of Zorith ships gathered in a new formation. She turned to General Harris, who was pacing beside her, still focused on the chaotic battlefield. "They've got one last card to play," Harris said, his voice grim. "We need to stop them now, or they'll slip through the cracks." Riva nodded. "Deploy the remaining fighters. We're not letting them escape. Not after all this." The last of Earth's elite pilots scrambled into their fighters, racing toward the remaining Zoreth ships. The tension in the air was palpable as the humans closed in. The Zoreth fighters were small, swift, and agile, weaving through the chaos of the larger battleships. But the humans had learned from their earlier encounters. They knew how to fight back against the Zoreth's overwhelming force. Lieutenant Carter, the leader of the fighter squadron, was the first to make contact with the enemy. His ship cut through the void of space, its engines roaring as he aimed his craft directly for one of the Zoreth's smaller vessels. He fired a series of shots, each one hitting its mark, and the Zoreth ship exploded in a brilliant flash of light. "They're not going down without a fight," Carter shouted over the comms. "Stay sharp, everyone. We've got this." Riva watched as the human pilots engaged in a furious dogfight with the remaining Zoreth forces. The sheer speed and power of the human fighters was breathtaking. They dodged and weaved, firing at the Zoreth with pinpoint accuracy, their laser blasts lighting up the darkness of space. But even as humanity fought valiantly to hold off the remaining enemy forces, the Zoreth were relentless. They struck back with deadly force, their ships launching waves of fire at the human fighters. The space above Earth became a dangerous, chaotic battleground, the sounds of laser blasts and explosions filling the airwaves. "General," Riva called out, her eyes wide with concern. "They're closing in on the core. We can't let them get any closer." Harris' expression hardened. "We'll protect it with everything we've got. Get the ground forces ready to deploy. If they make it past our defenses, we need to be prepared." Riva watched as the final wave of Zoreth fighters began their assault on the core facility. They were fast, and they were sneaky. But Earth's pilots weren't about to let them succeed. The human defense was tightening, and the gap between the Zoreth and the core was shrinking. It was clear that the humans were ready to make their final stand. "We're not backing down," Riva muttered under her breath. "This is it." The final moments of the battle felt like an eternity. One by one, Earth's remaining fighters fell, but the Zoreth weren't winning easily. Every time a human fighter was struck down, another one took its place. The relentless barrage of laser fire and explosions painted the sky as the battle for Earth reached its climax. It wasn't just a battle of ships anymore. It was a battle of wills. The Zoreth had come to Earth believing they were unstoppable, but humanity had proven time and again that they would fight for their survival. The Zoreth underestimated them, and that was their greatest mistake. Finally, as the last of the Zoreth ships closed in on the core, the final human squadron made its final attack. It was a last, desperate gamble. A series of well-placed shots disabled the Zoreth's shields, giving the remaining fighters the chance they needed. The human fighters charged straight into the heart of the Zoreth formation, their weapons blazing with everything they had left. As the final fighter swooped in, it launched a devastating strike. An explosion erupted from the heart of the enemy formation, sending the remaining Zoreth vessels into disarray. The core remained safe, its energy pulse flickering as it powered down, having completed its mission. For a moment, the battlefield was silent. The once mighty Zoreth fleet, the force that had come to Earth with plans of conquest, was now shattered. The silence was broken only by the triumphant cheers of humanity's pilots, who had fought for everything they had. Earth had survived. But Riva knew the fight wasn't truly over. The Zoreth were wounded, but not all of them were gone. There would be more battles ahead, more challenges to face. But for now, humanity had won. Against all odds, against an enemy that was far superior, humanity had proven that they could fight, and they had won. Riva exhaled deeply, her fingers gripping the console in front of her, as the holographic display shifted to show the retreating Zoreth fleet. It was over, for now. "We did it," General Harris said softly, his voice full of awe. "We really did it." Riva smiled grimly. "This is just the beginning, General. We've earned this victory, but we're not done. Not yet." As the remnants of the Zorith fleet retreated into the darkness of space, humanity stood victorious. The galaxy would never forget the courage, strength, and willpower of the Deathworlders. The Zorith had learned the hard way that humanity was not to be underestimated. But the war was far from over. This was just the first battle in a much larger conflict, and humanity had just shown the universe that they were ready for whatever came next. The galaxy would soon know that Earth was not a world to be trifled with. The price of victory. The victorious celebrations had barely begun when Riva's thoughts returned to the war they had just survived. The battle had been brutal, the loss immense, but they had won. Humanity had held its ground, proving that when the odds were stacked against them, they could rise up and defend their home. But victory came with its own cost. As the last of the Zorith fleet retreated into the distant stars, Riva stood alone in the command center, watching the flickering images on the holographic screens. Her heart was still racing from the adrenaline of the fight, but the weight of what they had achieved was settling heavily on her. While Earth had survived this battle, they had lost so much in the process. The survivors from Earth's fleets were being accounted for, their ships docking at Earth's stations for repairs and resupplies. But there was no denying that the victory had been costly. Ships had been destroyed, pilots lost, and whole cities on the planet's surface had been ravaged by the destructive attacks from the Zorith. The damage was widespread, but Earth's resolve remained unbroken. General Harris walked into the room, his face drawn with exhaustion. Riva could see the toll the battle had taken on him as well. He had always been a man of strength and resolve, but even he couldn't escape the weight of what had just happened. "We did it," Harris said, his voice low. "But at what cost?" Riva didn't answer immediately. She simply watched the hologram of the shattered Zorith fleet, the sparks of their retreating ships visible in the distance. The battle had been won, but the war was far from over. They had proven that humanity could stand against the Zorith, but they also knew that the Zorith would return, and next time, they would be prepared. "They won't let us have peace," Riva finally said. "The Zorith don't give up that easily. They've learned that humanity isn't like the other species they conquered. And that's exactly why they'll come back harder." Harris nodded, understanding what she meant. The Zorith were a ruthless species, and they wouldn't rest until they had crushed their enemies. Humanity had only bought themselves time, but the threat was far from gone. The galaxy would not forget the power that humanity had unleashed today, and there would be others who would come to challenge them. "We need to prepare for the next wave," Harris said. "We need a stronger defense, better weapons, and most importantly, unity. The galaxy will start looking at Earth as a threat now, and with the Zorith retreating, others will follow their lead." Riva looked down at the map of Earth displayed before her, showing the damaged regions still smoldering from the last assault. The destruction was heartbreaking, but there was also hope. Humanity had survived, and they would rebuild. There was no choice. "We've proven something today," Riva said, her voice full of determination. "We've proven that no matter how powerful they are, no matter how many of them there are, humanity will never just roll over. They will always fight. They will always stand. They will always survive." Harris stood beside her, looking out at the map. The weight of what had been lost was still there, but the fire of victory burned in his chest. "We'll rebuild, and we'll make sure the next time they come, we're ready for them." Riva nodded, her eyes steely with resolve. "It won't be easy, but we faced impossible odds before, and we've won." As the days passed, humanity began to rebuild. The military forces regrouped, preparing for the next phase of the war. Scientists and engineers worked day and night to reverse the damage and develop new technologies to counter the Zorith threat. The people of Earth had experienced loss, but they also had witnessed the indomitable will of their species, and that would be their strength moving forward. Riva's mind raced as she thought of the coming battles. The Zorith were not the only threat that humanity had to worry about. There were countless other alien species in the galaxy, some of whom would see Earth's victory as a challenge to their own dominance. But humanity had learned one very important lesson. They were not weak. They were not to be underestimated. They were the Death Worlders. "We will never back down," Riva whispered to herself. "We will never surrender." And so the battle for Earth raged on. Humanity had fought with everything it had, and the universe had taken notice. The Zorath were just the beginning. There would be more battles ahead, more struggles to face, but humanity had proven it was not just a species of survivors. It was a species of warriors. The war was far from over, but Riva knew that humanity would rise to every challenge. They had earned their place in the galaxy, and they would protect it at all costs. The Zorath had learned this the hard way, and soon the rest of the galaxy would learn it too. The price of victory. The victorious celebrations had barely begun when Riva's thoughts returned to the war they had just survived. The battle had been brutal, the loss immense, but they had won. Humanity had held its ground, proving that when the odds were stacked against them, they could rise up and defend their home. But victory came with its own cost. As the last of the Zorath fleet retreated into the distant stars, Riva stood alone in the command center, watching the flickering images on the holographic screens. Her heart was still racing from the adrenaline of the fight, but the weight of what they had achieved was settling heavily on her. While Earth had survived this battle, they had lost so much in the process. The survivors from Earth's fleets were being accounted for, their ships docking at Earth's stations for repairs and resupplies. But there was no denying that the victory had been costly. Ships had been destroyed, pilots lost, and whole cities on the planet's surface had been ravaged by the destructive attacks from the Zorath. The damage was widespread, but Earth's resolve remained unbroken. General Harris walked into the room, his face drawn with exhaustion. Riva could see the toll the battle had taken on him as well. He had always been a man of strength and resolve, but even he couldn't escape the weight of what had just happened. "We did it," Harris said, his voice low. "But at what cost?" Riva didn't answer immediately. She simply watched the hologram of the shattered Zorath fleet, the sparks of their retreating ships visible in the distance. The battle had been won, but the war was far from over. They had proven that humanity could stand against the Zorath, but they also knew that the Zorath would return, and next time, they would be prepared. "They won't let us have peace," Riva finally said. "The Zorath don't give up that easily. They've learned that humanity isn't like the other species they conquered. And that's exactly why they'll come back harder." Harris nodded, understanding what she meant. The Zorath were a ruthless species, and they wouldn't rest until they had crushed their enemies. Humanity had only bought themselves time, but the threat was far from gone. The galaxy would not forget the power that humanity had unleashed today, and there would be others who would come to challenge them. "We need to prepare for the next wave," Harris said. "We need a stronger defense, better weapons, and most importantly, unity. The galaxy will start looking at Earth as a threat now, and with the Zorath retreating, others will follow their lead." Riva looked down at the map of Earth displayed before her, showing the damaged regions still smoldering from the last assault. The destruction was heartbreaking, but there was also hope. Humanity had survived, and they would rebuild. There was no choice. "We've proven something today," Riva said, her voice full of determination. "We've proven that no matter how powerful they are, no matter how many of them there are, humanity will never just roll over. They will always fight. They will always stand. They will always survive." Harris stood beside her, looking out at the map. The weight of what had been lost was still there, but the fire of victory burned in his chest. "We'll rebuild, and we'll make sure the next time they come, we're ready for them." Riva nodded, her eyes steely with resolve. "It won't be easy, but we faced impossible odds before, and we've won." As the days passed, humanity began to rebuild. The military forces regrouped, preparing for the next phase of the war. Scientists and engineers worked day and night to reverse the damage and develop new technologies to counter the Zorath threat. The people of Earth had experienced loss, but they also had witnessed the indomitable will of their species, and that would be their strength moving forward. Riva's mind raced as she thought of the coming battles. The Zoreth were not the only threat that humanity had to worry about. There were countless other alien species in the galaxy, some of whom would see Earth's victory as a challenge to their own dominance. But humanity had learned one very important lesson. They were not weak. They were not to be underestimated. They were the Death Worlders. "We will never back down," Riva whispered to herself. "We will never surrender." And so the battle for Earth raged on. Humanity had fought with everything it had, and the universe had taken notice. The Zoreth were just the beginning. There would be more battles ahead, more struggles to face, but humanity had proven it was not just a species of survivors. It was a species of warriors. The war was far from over, but Riva knew that humanity would rise to every challenge. They had earned their place in the galaxy, and they would protect it at all costs. The Zoreth had learned this the hard way, and soon the rest of the galaxy would learn it too. Humanity had fought back, and they had won.